Okay, this video is going to demonstrate how to use Autodesk Inventor to model the tailstock clamp, which is pictured here. It's not quite as straightforward as you think for reasons that we'll get to in the process. And I'm going to only use, I'm not going to use any placed features. I'm going to only use extrusions or sketched features for this. However, you could use placed features for maybe the slots that go in the center at the end if you are that far along in your process. So to begin with, I'm going to go to Inventor and I'm going to start a new part file. And your first step is to create your new sketch. And so I'm going to just start on that front plane there, the XY plane, and I'm going to create some geometry here. So using a 2-point rectangle, this thing is about 5 inches long and 1.5 inches tall. So it's a good idea to create your geometry and then constrain it so that it's held in place. And then I'm going to go ahead and add my major dimensions here. It's 5 inches long and 1.5 inches tall. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to leave off some of the information that you might think is critical, and then I'm going to come back in and do it a different way. But I'm also going to nest some other information into this initial sketch that that will be used for future sketches, for future extrusion. So I'm going to kind of do a bottom-up design on this. So I also need to include the corners. You know, this is going to have a cutout on this corner here and a cutout on this corner here. Notice that the inference here is that those are going to stay lined up, so that, you know, as I move one side up, the other side moves up and down as well. I do want these to be equal, so this one's going to be equal to this one. And then I need to give it a dimension. So from here to here, that dimension is 4 1/8. And then from here to here, this dimension is 1/2. Now notice at this point that it is fully constrained. Even though I don't have this dimension in here, it knows that this and this have to be equal, so that's automatically going to be equal to 7/16. If I were to dimension it, it'll allow me to put that dimension in there, but it adds it as a driven dimension. So if I choose accept there, notice that it puts it in parentheses. It's a driven dimension. It's not one that drives the part, but is driven by the part. The other thing that I'm going to do is add an extra line in here for the cutout at the bottom, okay, in the middle that is. If I go back to the original image, I'm adding basically that line right there, okay, and that one is also 7/16 down from the top. So at this point, again, my sketch is fully constrained. I've got information in here that I will come back in and reuse for several different sketches. So I can say finish this sketch, and now I can extrude it. I'm going to do a mid-plane extrusion of 2 1/4 inches, and I'm going to extrude all of my profiles, not just the one. And I'm doing a mid-plane extrusion because this object is symmetrical. So, you know, my mid-plane is right along this center line. It'll allow me to do this center cut a little bit easier in the future here. So I've got my 4 profiles, I've got it done, I say okay. And you might think, well, why did you not just have the block? And again, the reason that I don't just want the block is because I've got the rest of that information that's nested in there that I'm going to use after I round the corners off. So my next step here is to go ahead and put that fillet in, 1 1/8 radius, so it's going to be filleted there and there, and I say okay. And now I can come back out and I can cut out the parts that I don't need. And it'll be evident here in a minute, but let me kind of preview this. If I go to inspect and I measure, the distance from one end to the other, okay, is exactly 5 inches, which is what we're supposed to have. But you'll see that it's not exactly 5 inches when we get done here. So if I come back now and I say, okay, let's go back in here, and I want to extrude that other stuff out. Remember, there's other stuff that I don't need. So in order to get that other stuff out, I'm going to turn my visibility back on this sketch, or I could choose share sketch. Okay, and now I can say, okay, let's extrude, and I need to extrude that corner right there and that corner right there. They're going to be cut features. We'll do the mid-plane extrusion through all. Okay, so mid-plane extrusion through all. So you can see now I'm cutting out those two corners. All right, and I'll say OK on that one. And I also want to cut out the mid portion here. So I'll say again, let's extrude this portion right here as a mid-plane extrusion, and that distance on this one is 1 3/8. And I'll say OK. And now that I'm done with that, I can turn off the visibility of this sketch. But before I do, I want to show you the reason why I did it this way. Again, it's supposed to be 5 inches long overall, with this line right here being 4 1/8. But because this fillet on the end, or this rounded edge, has a 1 1/8 radius, the distance from the end to the end actually ends up being a little less than 5. So if I go back to inspect here and I say measure from that corner there to that corner there, you'll see that it's actually a few thousandths of an inch less than 5 inches. But it has to be, because if I make it exactly 5 inches from corner to corner, then this piece right here would not be necessarily the right length anymore. So remember, this one right here is critical. That one has to be 4 1/8 in order to get it to work. So at this point now, I can come back in here, turn off the visibility for this sketch, and then put my final sketch in. Again, I'm going to put these slots as a placed feature. So I'll use the slot tool here. I'll use the center to center slot tool. There's several of them I could use. They need to line up. Okay, so I'll just say I've got one slot that's going to go here. I've got another slot that's going to go here. And notice that it will infer that they're going to line up. If I come back in and I change the size of this one, it doesn't stay consistent. However, I'll show you how to fix that. I do know that they need to be equal, so the length of this one is going to be equal to the length of this one. The diameter of this one is going to be equal to the diameter of this one. And now I can, again, dimension them. So I can say, okay, from that point right there, and you're thinking, what the heck is that? So let me come back to the image. See, the 9/16 here goes from that corner right there. It's 9/16 to the center, and that happens to be, if I just hover over it, that's that right there. If I were to maybe tilt it up just a little bit here so you can see it, okay, it's that corner there. So the distance from that corner to the center of this is 9/16, and the distance from the center of that one to the center of that one is 3/4, and then my distance across here is 1/2. And then I need to constrain this so that it knows that it's lined up with here, because if I were to come in here, notice that I can still move it up and down. So I'll add that horizontal constraint between the center of the circle there and that. So now this one is completely locked in. The only thing I need to do is locate this one. So again, from the end point to the center of that circle, it's equal to that one. And now again, I am fully constrained. So I can finish this sketch and now do my extrude. So I'll say I want to extrude both of these as a cut feature through all. Make it go the other direction, and then OK. So I've got one sketch for 3 different extrusions, and then a second sketch for this last extrusion. And then there are no unconsumed sketches over here, and that's your completed project.